Alright guys, so we're going to take a look. This is the second deck in my article featuring three colored decks. Now I've done a lot with the green, and green is the perfect one for running multiple colors because it gives you all the options for fetching lands. But I wanted to put together a deck that didn't use green, and in other words, it would have to kind of fix its own mana base in other ways, through lands, through card draw, etc. And I also wanted to I feel like I've been playing a lot of aggro. I wanted to play something a lot more control heavy. So what I came up with was Esper Control. Now this is something I fell in love with. I'm a big fan of blue-black control, and Esper Control is another thing during the heydays of Build Your Own Standard. I had put together a deck there and kind of fell in love with the idea of this three-color control. So what I came up with was basically a Teachings Delver deck for Esper Control. Now, I love Teachings. Teachings is a card that allows you to fetch up pieces. I think it works great to have that kind of tutor ability in a deck where you kind of need three colors, and it may be a little shaky at times on those three colors. So being able to tutor up maybe a Brainstorm, as underpowered as it is, could be necessary to brainstorm, to switch your cards around and draw into that land that you need. But there's so many options you can customize your spell base with Mystical Teachings. I'm running 3 Soul Manipulations because I feel like Casual Pauper is a lot more creature heavy, and I'm creature light, and I think the interaction is great. But you can take a card away from there, put something else in. You can run singles. You can just create this great toolbox. So I'm running 2 copies. I didn't want. I thought 3 was hitting a bit too heavy. I thought 2 was a nice middle ground. With the card draw and stuff, you can find those pretty easily. Next up, full set of Delvers. This is going to be a great card, but there's a couple restrictions when you build a Delver deck. The first off is the fact that your land base has to be smaller. And what I mean by that is that you don't want to hit into lands. If you're running into lands, you're running into creatures, then you're not flipping your Delver, which is absolutely necessary. So you kind of find this tough middle ground in this deck. With the Delver, you want to reduce your number of lands, and you say, well, you're still running 22 lands. That's awfully heavy for a Delver deck. And it's true, it is a little bit heavy, but here's the other part of it. When you run 3 colors, you also want a bit of a heavier mana base so that you can increase your chances of drawing the land that you need. So you had to find some kind of middle ground. I'm running 22, usually I run 24. Still, this may be pushing it. But it's kind of where I found the common ground at currently. If I was really pushing this through deck testing for competitive, I might change it. But I found this nice balance here. I'm only running 4 copies of Evolving Wilds. You would think maybe without the green that I would also be running Terramorphic Expanse or the Ravnica lands, but what I really wanted to do is minimize the number of lands that come into play tapped. When you play Control, there's nothing more frustrating than having lands come into play tapped. You want a little bit more on the basics, or just lands that will come into play so that you have mana open and available to play your counterspells, to play your control. You want to have enough mana that you can play your creature and have something to back it up. Whether that be a counterspell or a creature kill, you want to have something to back it up on either side. So you kind of find that middle ground there, and that's that. Now also with the Delver, you want to be running very low on creatures, which is easy to do when you're running Teachings and stuff like this. It's not a big deal. So kind of the other way, we're looking at the heavier mana base to increase the odds of drawing into, say, a Plains. Evolving Wilds to increase the odds of finding what we need because you can sack it and search. Now, kind of the other way you're going to approach this is, and I hinted at this with Teachings, is through card draw. Brainstorm is a card that's in there to back up Delver of Secrets, to set up the top of your deck to flip it. I guess I can't say this enough. I will admit that I was wrong. I was biased against Brainstorm. When it comes to those single blue mana card draw spells, and we have maybe 3 or 4 of them, I think, available to us in Magic, Brainstorm's not my favorite. I would much rather run something like Preordain, but I have learned that if I'm playing Delver, I really need Brainstorm to set it up. The 2 of them together really work out well, and and I did. I admittedly, I'm not a big-headed kind of person. I admittedly made the wrong choice in earlier decks, in earlier articles, and I have no problem stepping up and saying that I made that mistake. But Brainstorm also has that ability to kind of set up the top of your deck to help you find land cards. I wanted other card draw to really balance that out, and this is perhaps an odd choice, but I am running 2 copies of Muldrifter. Now, if you look at this mana base, I am sitting at 4, but there's only 2 copies of Mystical Teachings that sit at 4, and then you have Muldrifter that sits at 5, and this kind of tilts our mana curve a little bit. But what you can do with Muldrifter is play it for the Evoke plus Undying Evil to draw 4 cards, and I really liked this interaction. I felt by only running 2 Muldrifters that I was not overdoing it. If I was running 3 or 4, then I would be kind of relying on a heavier mana base, which this deck really doesn't want to support. But I figure by only running 2, I can still get some card draw off it. I can still do some combat tricks with the Undying Evil, etc. Help me out in the late game versus flyers, and it wouldn't hurt me too much to run that 5-costed creature. Undying Evil is something I've had a lot of fun with recently. If you check out my channel, there is an Undying 8-post deck. Not my creation. I came across it, in discussion about Pauper on the MTG Salvation forums. And in playing with Undying Evil, I found that Undying is a mechanic that I really enjoy. So, using this in combination with, even Delver, to get it back with that counter, but with the Evoked Muldrifter, with the Ravenous Rats, is great. One thing you will note is that Undying Evil on Shrieking Grotesque will bring it back as a 3/2 creature, but because you read the fine print here, the discard will not happen because you did not use black to cast it. So bringing it back is just going to bring it back as a bigger creature. So that's a great option available to you. I really liked that, and it is part of my toolbox. When it comes to control, you can see I am running 4 copies of Ravenous Rats and 4 of the Shrieking Grotesques. Shrieking Grotesque is a card that I love. White and black is not a heavily played deck. If it was, I will say there is a white-black deck with Pestilence that has won several DEs, I think all with the same player. But it does not include the Grotesque. The Grotesque is a card I love, and I think it's one of those, I don't want to call it a pet card, but it is one of those cards in Pauper that I think is underestimated and is great. Unfortunately, it comes down to the same card as Liliana Spectre, which fits better in a monocolored deck or something like that. And it doesn't have that requirement of needing the 2 different colors to get the discard. But anyways, it's a good 3-costed 2/1 flyer. What really makes it great is the fact that it comes in for this. The mana cost is 2 colorless and 1 white, which is great because this deck is light on white, so you only need 1 plains and you can pull out other mana from elsewhere. So there was really kind of a heavy hand destruction aspect to this, between the Rats and the Grotesque. So I also brought in 3 copies of Castigate. That's another card that, maybe just white-black, I guess I have to sit down and put it together, because that's another card that I really feel is underestimated in the format. It's like a better Duress. Maybe it's just another pet card. You can do a lot of great discard things, but anyways, so between these 3, it's kind of the heavier. I wanted a bigger focus, let's say, on hand discard, as opposed to counter control. Now I am running 3 copies of Mana Leak. I felt this was a better addition than a hard counter spell because we are in 3 colors, and Mana Leak requires that 1 colorless. This deck might be able to pull off the double blue for a counter spell, but I think Mana Leak is the safer choice. Soul Manipulation, I am running 3, like I said earlier. I think it's a great card. I think Casual Pauper tends to be a bit heavier on creatures, so having the ability to use Soul Manipulation and get back, Muldrifter that I evoked, or some creature, is just a great thing to me. If I was playing around with this more, maybe I would cut that back, because this is a very creature light deck, so a lot of times it may only act as a counter spell for a creature. Something to keep in mind. But I did bring it in as my other kind of counter control for this deck. When it came to creature kill, I am running 3 copies of Agony War. That's a great blue-black card. I'm trying to integrate some of these multicolored spells, because I think there's a lot of utility, and some of them just get underplayed. So, I've talked a lot about Agony Warp. We all know it can do some great combat tricks, and can be underestimated. Also, I've decided I started bringing in 3 Diabolic Edicts. This used to be Doomblades. I have found that, it gets really frustrating when you run against some deck running black, because you cannot use those spells to kill a creature. Another great benefit to Diabolic Edict is I find myself these days coming against more and more of these hexproof decks, and you can't touch those creatures. And no matter how much control you're running, if you can't kill creatures, with those enchantment stacks or creature buffs, however they're doing it, they're going to be able to beat you down pretty easily. So by bringing in Diabolic Edict, it gives me opportunities to get rid of those creatures. So there it is. Like I said, this is a lot of utility with Mystical Teachings. If you want to take this deck for a run, feel free to switch cards up, and bring in anything you want, because Teachings gives you that whole toolbox package. But I did think this was a nice control deck when it comes to the hand discard is really the focus of control. But you get a lot of great stuff going on between all these interactions and some of these underestimated multicolored cards. So I hope you enjoy it. Check out the example game. Check out the other 2 decks that I have showcased in this.